All right, man, peace. So now this is going to be part 2 in the series on Donald Trump's quote-unquote summit on race, in which he's decided to invite both Colin Kaepernick and Kanye West, who are both assets. Now, when we left off in part 1, Mr. Max Kellerman was making his assertions on Kanye West's alleged education and trying to create a correlation between intelligence and education. So let's let him continue.
Now to Kanye West. Stephen A., Kanye West is not an intellectual. He has not been rigorously formally educated, nor is he, if he is a deep thinker, then that he is not able to articulate it in any...
Well, let me say this, and I've already covered this at the end of part 1. I do agree that Kanye West has issues with articulation, but he's an artist. He's supposed to have issues articulating himself verbally. That's why they express themselves through music and artwork and writing, etc. Well, I guess in a certain form of writing, poetry per se. But most artists oftentimes have an issue expressing themselves in regular verbal discourse. That's why they turn to forms of self-expression. Now, Max Kellerman also stated that he believes that the summit is insincere on the part of Donald Trump because he believes that it's based in cynicism, which to me does not quite jive, because Max Kellerman himself also stated that Donald Trump ran on a platform of ethnocentricity alongside white nationalists, quote unquote. Well, if that's truly what you believe, then why would Donald Trump feel as if he has to organize a summit on race when he already knows where his bread is buttered? That's not quite making sense. But overall, let's understand something. Being a cynic is essentially always correlated with being a politician. You're always going to do what's best for you. But do I believe that Donald Trump has to do this? No, he doesn't. He already knows what his platform is, and he already knows what his main constituency is. He does not need to do this at all.
Any kind of public speech, unless you include kind of interpreting lyrics, where you can have a debate about that.
There we see Kanye once again with the blonde hair for Hippocrates. He is an agent of chaos.
But the idea of mental slavery goes back to, even predates Marcus Garvey. But you know that the Bob Marley song, Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds. That was taken really from a Marcus Garvey speech in 1937. You know, others can emancipate us physically, but we have none but ourselves can emancipate our minds.
Yes, and Marcus Garvey was also a pawn. He was a Luciferian.
And Kanye here seems to either be clumsily referring to that idea, or else without rigorous formal education, or much at all, it seems to me.
Now, this is modus operandi of the Caucasian liberal, especially the Caucasian Jew liberal. And I've mentioned this in many videos in the past. You will always see them utilize this tactic, that whenever a so-called black person is not liberal, they try to harangue them for their quote-unquote lack of education. Meaning the only reason why you're thinking on the level that you're thinking at is because you have not been properly educated, Negro. Let me enlighten you. That's why I always tell you, brothers, that the Caucasian liberal, they're truly just a manifestation, a modernized manifestation of the quote-unquote white man's burden syndrome. They believe that is incumbent upon them, that it's been entrusted upon them to shine a light on the Negro and lead him out of his tunnel, out of his cave, into quote-unquote enlightenment or illumination, that being accepting homosexuality, lesbianism, globalism, etc. That's all it's about. So you're not supposed to be affiliating yourself or associating yourself with either one of these two factions. That's why I state that my channel or my channels or wherever I'm going to end up is always going to be based in being apolitical. You're not supposed to be associated or affiliated with any political party, because none of these political parties care about the so-called black man. And when you decide that you're going to embrace any form of political mindset, it has to be based in reality, meaning what? We have to build up our own politician. We have to imbue them with an understanding of what they have to do for the so-called black community. Now, that's purely hypothetical, because in this society, which is already on its way down, I don't believe that our quote-unquote community is ever going to get to the level where we're operating on a high enough mental scale to understand that we have to build up our own representation, because first we have to establish a culture. And if we don't establish a culture first, meaning an understanding of codes of conduct and mores and things of that nature, we're not going to even be able to come to any type of agreement on what we want our representative to bring forth to the populace at large. But once again, it's purely hypothetical. This place is going to be torn down and rent asunder before so-called black people are on the level to truly come together from a cultural standpoint. Unfortunately, too many of our people, they have too many motivations that are, to quote Mr. Max Kellerman, purely cynical, meaning self-serving.
Is stumbling upon this idea himself and articulating it poorly. I think that's what's going on. Now, the reason this has caused waves is, number one, Donald Trump has responded to it because Kanye praised him, and obviously, if you praise Donald Trump, he wants to include you right away in a talk. But also because people pay way too much attention to public figures who really have, it's not that they have no business in the political realm, because, people's thoughts about politics are, if it resonates with people. Hold on.
I totally agree with Max Kellerman there. And I've stated that ad infinitum. And this happens especially in the so-called black community, and Stephen A. Smith is partially responsible for it, where our people care way too much. I can't tell you how many requests I got to speak about what Kanye West stated. Because so-called black people, they become so galvanized by what a quote-unquote famous black person says about race, as if their opinions are more valid than the average so-called black person's opinions, just because they can sing or dance or dunk a basketball. And this is why I make these videos pertaining to a LeBron James or Kobe Bryant or whoever. They have a certain gift in whatever field of endeavor it is, whether it's sport or entertainment, what have you. But that does not make their views or their opinions about quote-unquote race any more valid or any less valid. Especially since, for the most part, very few of our people know what they're talking about. It's very rare that you come across any one of our people that truly have an understanding of what this society is about. It's very rare.
Hold on one second. If it resonates with people, fine. But he's an artist. He is a great artist, but he's not a public orator or intellectual in a way that I think that the public. What's that?
Max.
What's that?
A black man is sitting on the air and telling you that this black man, what he said about slavery being a choice, might be one of the greatest insults as a people.
Now, you see, this is why if they're going to have this discussion, then they probably need another so-called black man on the panel, because all Stephen A. is going to try to do is pull rank in regards to whose argument or whose viewpoint is more valid based on quote-unquote skin color, which is what he denotes race to be. So what's really the point of having a conversation if you're going to tell Max Kellerman that your viewpoint is more valid than his just because of the color of your skin? You're not even saying that my viewpoint holds more weight because of my life experience and my understanding of who I am as a person. You're really just trying to pull rank. And Stephen A. Smith does this in almost every racial conversation, and he only makes himself look stupid because he himself has no understanding of what his race is. He does not know his own history at all. And as I've already stated in other videos, the only thing that Kanye West did was pretty much repeat, not word for word, but he pretty much repeated the sentiment of Harriet Tubman, who herself stated that she could have freed more quote-unquote slaves if she could have made them realize that they were slaves. That's what she said. It's very obvious when you watch Kanye that he needs help. So if he needs help, people should be a little bit more understanding, especially when he himself has stated that he's not really built to verbally express himself. He's not someone who can articulate himself very well. It's obvious that he has issues. It's obvious that he's under the programming. A lot of these Negroes are under the programming. A lot of so-called black people in general are under various levels of societal programming. That's why I always tell a lot of these cats, especially the pro-black cats, I know for a fact that you just want a hug. And that's all you want. And you're trying to act like that's not what it is, but it is what it is, because I just understand the so-called black man very well and the so-called black woman. Liberal blacks, pro-blacks, they just want a hug. They want to be justified and validated by the Caucasian. And Kanye West is the same way. That's why he kept saying what? All we need is love. He was repeating one of these musical artists from back in the day. I believe it was John Lennon. He wants to be a martyr for Lucifer. Luciferianism is globalism. When you look at a person like Colin Kaepernick, he's on the other end of the spectrum, but they believe the same thing. They just believe from opposite viewpoints.
We've ever heard. I understand
Right.
your point and how you articulate. But what I'm saying is that you're talking about what you surmise he meant, or what I'm telling you how it hit a community, if not a.
No, sir, you're not qualified to state how it hit a community. Once again, Stephen A. Smith, you do not represent all so-called black people. But unfortunately, because so many of our people are two-dimensional thinkers, they pump an idiot like this up because he's on television to make him think that he's equipped to represent everyone, and he's not. All he is a basketball writer.
Not a nation of people. How incredibly. And so I just had somebody, one of my best friends, text me just a second while you were talking. He said, quote, Kanye West is dead to me. He does not want to hear what kind of explanation circulates around what Kanye West must have meant.
Stephen A.
Now, isn't it interesting that Kanye West is dead to him, and I'm sure that he's dead to a lot of so-called black people. But all Kanye West did was make a statement. So many so-called Caucasians in America have done far worse than that, at least according to the allegations of many pro-blacks, but pro-blacks still won't leave America, even though they're no longer under physical slavery, allegedly. But now we're getting back to Kanye West's assertion, which is, if you're not under physical slavery, but you're still looking for validation from the Caucasian, maybe you're under mental slavery. So maybe he's not so wrong after all. Who knows?
Yeah, but
You
Stephen
do
A, hold on,
not-
hold on a
Wait,
second,
let me,
Molly.
can I say one thing really quick? Because Stephen A, as
wasn't-
soon as he said something about, he said the whole slavery comments, I just want to add that he lost, like, I want to say 10 million followers instantly. And the one thing I wanted to ask is, I don't think he can ever come back from this. Like,
Well,
I think Kanye
I don't
West
think
is
he can
done.
either.
I don't think there's
Go
anything
ahead.
he can do or anything
Guys,
he can say.
Yes, well, that's what you're hoping for, that he's done. Well, according to CBS Morning News, he gained followers. Now, these people are saying that he lost followers. Does it really matter? If you're not able to express yourself how you truly feel, does it really matter who your quote-unquote followers are? Because people are only going to quote-unquote follow you as long as you're saying what they want you to say. Kanye West has his own issues. Number one, he's under the spell of the quote-unquote Kardashian coven. That's his main problem. Number two, he's been raised, in my view, from childhood under the programming, starting with his father, Ray West, who, as I've already stated, has been associated with Scientology from before Kanye West was born, and is classified as a quote-unquote auditor. Once again, everything is not as it always seems. And at the end of the day, I've heard people say far worse than Kanye West ever stated. It's just hilarious to me. People like Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls are mythologized in the so-called black community. Biggie Smalls made songs talking about the 10 crack commandments, and how he has dudes that fuck children in their ass and throw them over bridges. But those people are not dead to the so-called black community. But Kanye West can make a statement about how so-called blacks are under mental slavery, and he's dead to them, and he's Kanye and all this other stuff. Look, I always push things to the furthest extent in regards to the sentiments that people put forth. If you don't like this society so much, how come you have not started a revolution, or you have not left? That's my question for the pro-blacks, and that will always be my question. I'm not concerned about Kanye West. He's just another dude with an opinion, with a viewpoint.
But my point is really, Stephen A., Kanye West's music and what he produces, because I like him better as a producer than a rapper, always have anyway. I think he's underrated actually as a producer and overrated as a rapper, to tell you the truth, and I've always felt that way. But who cares what he... you
Thank you, sir. I agree with that. That's one thing that you've stated that I agree with, Mr. Max Kellerman.
You really... people put stock in what an artist has to say about...
Well, let me correct you, Max Kellerman. Not people. The so-called black community does. You know why the so-called black community does? Because, once again, the so-called black community, they like to put Band-Aids on a tumor. They think that just because they rub some Robitussin on it, that it's going to make it go away. And our people are not solution-oriented. That's why they're so hurt, because they need rappers and singers and basketball players to act as intermediaries between the so-called black community and the white man, because they're hoping that one day they can get black celebrities to broker that hug that they're looking for. That's why people are so butthurt over what Kanye West stated. And number one, what he stated was not that erroneous at all. Once again, it was asserted by Harriet Tubman many years ago, just in different words. Kanye said it in a very clunky way. But there are far worse perpetrators of being quote unquote disrespectful to the so-called black community than Kanye West. He's just a provocateur. That's his job. He's an agent of chaos.
Let me answer that.
You know what it is? Wait, hold on.
Max is from their community.
Wait, hold on a second. You guys keep interrupting. Hang in a second. Eddie Murphy has a joke about what Kanye West says that predates Kanye West's comments by 30 plus years. Eddie Murphy actually, in his routine, actually said modern day brothers act like we couldn't have been slaves.
Absolutely. That was from Delirious.
Slaves and mocks what Kanye West eventually said. Of course, what Kanye West said is ridiculous. But how much?
Look at Stephen A. Smith losing all his composure, all his bitch energies coming out. Once again, so-called black man. This is why we're in the condition that we're in right now. It has nothing to do with the police. It has nothing to do with all that other shit. It's because the so-called black man can't control his bitch energy most of the time. Because so many so-called black men are not three-dimensional thinkers. They're desperate for that hug. They have a stalker mentality. Is it every brother? Absolutely not. But a large portion of so-called black men and liberal black females, of course, they want that validation from the Caucasian. And they're mad at Kanye West because they feel like he made the so-called black community look bad, quote unquote.
Well, I'm not, but see, that's where, stop right there. No one is accusing you of saying that what he said wasn't ridiculous. No one, I would never accuse you of that, Max. What I'm asking you is to embrace the totality. Max, excuse me for asking this question. Yeah. You are a Jewish person, am I correct?
Correct.
If somebody said to you, Max Kellerman, or any Jewish person that you know, that the Holocaust was a choice, would you dissect it like that? You would be appalled, and I would be up in arms for you.
But
that is just an incredibly insensitive comment.
But Stephen A., if it was a Jewish rapper or Jewish actor, or in fact Bobby Fischer, who was half Jewish and a great chess champion, became a loon and started saying things like that and worse, and it's not like I was, oh my God, Bobby Fischer. It's like, Bobby Fischer, who cares what he thinks about?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. That's the difference between bitch energy and actually being a three-dimensional thinker. Once again, so-called black man, what Max Kellerman is illustrating right here is why the so-called Jews can get quote-unquote reimbursed for the Holocaust, and why so-called black people keep crying for reparations that will never come. Because he's assessing things based off of a three-dimensional thinking. Now, he will apply separate standards for himself than he will for you. When I say he, I'm talking about the Caucasian Jew liberal like a Max Kellerman. But our people's problem is that our people are just way, way, way too emotional. Look at Stephen A. Smith. This nigga look like he's about to cry. Like, come on, man, get it together.
Thinks about politics.
Yeah, but Max, you forgot what Kanye used to be like. He's the one who said George Bush doesn't like white people, all that.
No, that's not what he stated. He stated that George Bush does not like black people. And that has nothing to do with the statement that he made. It's just amazing to me that Molly Karam, who's not even a so-called black person, can tell Kanye West what he's supposed to think about so-called black history or so-called black issues.
Fall back, everybody. I'm the black man on this show. I am telling you what that man said and how
Look at Max Kellerman. Max Kellerman look like he's trying to keep from laughing.
Incredibly insulting that is. This is not a debate. This is not a debate.
Well, if it's not a debate, why are you having the conversation then, sir? Stephen A. Smith, he has the persona of the liberal black woman. When things are not going his way, he thinks that just by talking louder, he's supposed to convince people. Once again, so-called black man, this is why people do not take you seriously. Because they know they can trigger you emotionally with silly shit like this. Kanye West is one out of what? 25, 30 million so-called black men in America. And what he stated is supposed to make the needle move that much. That's why our people cannot get to where they claim they want to go. Allegedly, they want to go there. But I know for a fact they don't, because I know what our people really want, which is that hug.
What he said was out of line. Anybody, if a person who was white and Jewish said that about the Holocaust. I'm not trying to say, Max, that you're wrong about how it would be dissected. I'm not trying to say that it would be taken seriously. What I am saying is that there is no way on earth that the insulting reality of that would not rape through the core of any Jewish person.
I don't
alive.
understand, but Stephen A., the only thing the only thing I don't understand is obviously it's insulting. I'm talking about it. Is that
what Max Kellerman is trying to say is that obviously what Kanye West stated couldn't be esteemed as being quote-unquote insensitive, especially to people who are notoriously oversensitive, that being the so-called black community. His point is, why is what Kanye West has to say about serious issues, why is that put on such a high pedestal in the so-called black community? Now, of course, when brothers ask me to talk about certain topics, I write them down and I get to them. But our people, they put way too much of an onus on celebrities, quote-unquote celebrities, and what they think and what they have to say. It's a major issue. It's a major problem. The so-called black man has to get his priorities in order.
Is there no comment that can be made after everyone just says it's insulting?
No, I'm not trying to say that. What I'm saying to you is that the way it is absorbed to
guys,
sit up
let's
there
take a
and
quick
try
break.
to
We're going to
dismiss
come back
it.
to
He's
this.
an artist.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay,
we'll be back.
come back.
We'll be back in a minute. More First Take in a minute. Stay here. If you're just joining us, we're having a heated discussion.
No, you were not having a heated discussion. You were having an argument. It was really a one-sided discussion. Max Kellerman was attempting to make certain points, and Stephen A. Smith was, as usual, becoming cantankerous due to his inability to control his emotions based off of his real ignorance. And oftentimes, I'll make statements based off of the overuse of the word ignorant. That word is definitely overused in the so-called black community, especially by the liberal black female. But once again, the reason why Stephen A. Smith is becoming so upset is because he does not know any real history. He does not know who he is. And he's had a battery put in his back by many of the powers that be in this society that have taught him what he should want out of the society, which is being validated by the Caucasian. So he feels as if his quote-unquote pain and his hurt isn't acknowledged by all the factions that he values so much, that being particularly the quote-unquote Caucasian, he's going to explode. And if he can't get every so-called black person of prominence to agree with him and how important it is to get everyone else to care about so-called black people, then you know what, life just might not be worth living. And there are so many so-called blacks that feel that way, and it's very, very sad and shameful, to be honest with you. Our people need to start being self-validated.
President invited Colin Kaepernick and Kanye West to join him in a summit to alleviate racial tension. It appears Colin is woke and that Kanye is in a sunken place. Stephen A.?
Now, did you hear what Miss Molly Karam just stated? She said that Colin Kaepernick is quote-unquote woke, meaning he's someone who gets galvanized by social media and has no depth or any real substance to his conversation. But as we all know, the term woke on a surface level for liberal females and liberal black men and pro-blacks, it means that you're conscious and you're aware of everything that's going on and you're not going to take it anymore, blah, blah, blah. So she asserts that Colin Kaepernick is quote-unquote woke. And the only reason why she's saying that, and I put this forth maybe over a year ago, because originally Molly Karam was against Colin Kaepernick until he showed that he was a woman worshiper on his social media. When he started talking about Women's Month and Women's Day and all this other stuff, then all of a sudden she got down with the program. And that's really all it's about. And I tell you brothers this all the time. All these super liberal movements, these so-called civil rights movements, they're all based in Luciferianism. It all goes back to the veneration of the mother goddess as well as her son Heru. That's it. Once Molly Karam saw that Colin Kaepernick was going down that pathway and that he was ready to pay obeisance to the feminine principle, that's when she got down with him. And he's being controlled by his woman as well, Miss Ness Nitty. But Molly Karam also stated what? That Kanye West is in the quote-unquote sunken place. Now, I agree, he is in a sunken place, but so is Colin Kaepernick. They're both under my control. But who is Molly Karam to make that assertion? Once again, she's not a so-called black person. So who is she to say that because Kanye West is not willing to get down with the liberal agenda? That's all it's about. They think that there is an intellectual issue with any so-called black man who's not ready to get down with the liberal agenda. And so-called black men, you have to understand, they attack you from many different angles. And the liberal angle is the main one that they try to make you feel shame for not embracing.
Okay, it's all you.
Let me direct this comment at the both of you so we understand exactly where I'm coming from, okay?
Before Stephen A. Smith starts, once again, it's very important for him, if he's going to have racial conversations, that he has one or two other so-called blacks on the panel. Because if he's going to continue to try to pull the "I'm the black man here" card, then you might as well not have the conversation with people who are not so-called black. What's the point?
First of all, Max Kellerman, I want you to understand that in no way am I questioning your level of sensitivity to my community or various communities out there. I know what a great dude you are, and I know that your heart is in the right place. And
Get to the point, nigga.
And I am not accusing you of being wrong about anything. So I want to make sure that that is clear. Molly, you know.
Well, you're not accusing him of being wrong about anything, but in the last segment, you look like you were about to cry.
You know I love you, and shoot, I wanted you to be on this show, damn it. I mean, I got nothing but love and respect for both of y'all. I'm not saying that y'all are wrong in any way. What I am asking you to do, however, is to embrace hearing something like that about your own community. And then asking yourself, are you really going to sit back and dissect the intent and the meaning behind such an incendiary choice of words?
Well, actually, that's what you're supposed to do, Stephen A. Smith. You're actually supposed to evaluate what people say and why they say it. That's how you grow intellectually, sir. No, you're not supposed to respond to everything that you don't like an emotional bitch. But that's the problem with too many so-called black men in the quote-unquote black community, because they've been raised with that feminine energy.
To come out of somebody's mouth. And I will repeat what I said in a previous statement. If you are white and you are Jewish and you uttered out of your mouth that the Holocaust was by choice, how would the Jewish community react to something like that? We all know the answer to that question. They would be up in arms, and rightfully so, and
sure,
everybody would side with them, because that's insane.
Do you think
that's all I'm saying?
Do you think that I'm somehow excusing or rationalizing
Not at all.
Okay, I want to be very clear about something. I want to be very clear about what I'm saying.
Absolutely, I'm not accusing you of that. What I'm saying is that you wouldn't expect, folks, if I sat up here and then try to explain the potential.
Okay, I understand where you're going, but what I'm saying is this.
That would be problematic.
I believe you've covered the basic outrage, the reaction in outrage. At that point, should I just sit here and also be outraged? And we'll be outraged.
Thank you, sir. What is the point of everybody being outraged all the time? It's very obvious that Stephen A. Smith is under a certain level of programming. I've touched on this earlier in this video. So many so-called black people are under a certain level of programming, not necessarily to the degree of Kanye West or Colin Kaepernick, but there are layers of programming that are put on the so-called black community, starting from when the child first enters elementary school, first with the slavery narrative. You're just a slave. That's all you are. That's all you come from. And that imbues a certain inferiority complex that stays with the so-called black child all the way through high school into adulthood, where they naturally assume the position of being a servant and believing that they should be searching out or seeking the validation of the Caucasian. That slavery narrative is very, very important. That slavery programming is very important to implement and install from a child's youth. And they get so-called blacks programmed to the point where they actually get upset when that slavery narrative is questioned.
Be outraged together for a little while. That's what everyone does, right? But on this show, we actually delve into it and talk about it and get underneath it, right? Get into it. So you have, I believe, expressed sufficient outrage. If you'd like me to state where I am emotionally with it, I would say that the idea that Kanye presents himself as a deep thinker is contempt. I have contempt for it.
I don't think that Kanye presents himself as a deep thinker. That's why he had Candace Owens with him, so that she could try to substantiate many of his understandings, his leanings, what have you. Once again, the so-called black community is at the level of an adolescent in regards to their overall understanding and maturity. They throw tantrums. They have a hard time coming to terms with reality. And unfortunately, too many of our people do not like responsibility as a whole, as a quote-unquote community. Our people do not like the responsibility of actually being in charge and what that entails. What does it mean to be a ruler? Most of our people are not ready for that. So they throw tantrums just like a teenager does.
For that idea, I don't consider him a deep thinker. I think he's he has an artistic way of thinking, which is not rational. He's an artist. He's not a public intellectual.
I agree, sir.
And so I take his public comments about history, about politics. I don't pay attention to them. I don't think they're important. For those who do, yes, you should be outraged by this.
That was a little shot at Stephen A. Smith, and really it was a little shot at the so-called black community as well, because in other words, what Max Kellerman is stating is that if you're dumb enough to take what he says seriously, then you deserve to be emotionally moved by what he's saying, because that means that it's very easy to manipulate you. Once again, so-called black men, do not allow yourself to be manipulated by so-called celebrities. It's their job to move the needle. That's why I call them agents of chaos. Kanye West is under mind control, man. He's not even fully aware of what he's doing or what he's saying. Every once in a while, the quote-unquote real him starts to emerge, but he has so many personality alters, he does not even know who the real him is. That's why I state the real issue is that Kanye West needs help. And can he be salvaged? Who knows?
If that satisfies, what you're talking about. The reason I brought up, for example, Eddie Murphy, is Eddie Murphy in a comedy routine made fun of this way of thinking 30 plus years ago, right? I mean, and when I'm explaining...
He did to a degree, but what Eddie Murphy stated in the routine and Delirious was that brothers act like they couldn't have been slaves back during the quote-unquote slavery time, until that whip came on you. Kanye West's statement is that after slavery, our people are still mental slaves. And he was really questioning the slave narrative. That's why he said, all of y'all, for 400 years, because he was saying to himself, how could you have a complete race of people under bondage for 400 years and there be no dissension? Because what he was doing was questioning what he was taught, but he was never taught that there were so-called blacks that owned slaves, that there were free blacks, and that you had slave revolts and things of that nature, because they don't teach that in school. All they teach is that every so-called black person picked cotton for 400 years. That's all they teach. They don't teach you the nuances of that time period. So that's really what he was questioning. And it's incumbent upon a so-called black person who actually understands these things to inform him. But Stephen A. Smith does not have that level of information. That's why I call him ignorant. That's why he is emotionally disturbed right now, because he himself does not know how to refute what Kanye West stated. So all he can do is throw a tantrum like a bitch.
His lack of formal education, Kanye's, or maybe his clumsy way of restating something maybe he read, because without a lot of formal education, he has an interesting background in education, grew up kind of in different places of the world, and has some some aptitude in terms of his intelligence. Naturally, you can see that, and he's musically gifted and all those things. But one of the problems without a rigorous formal education is you're susceptible to low quality information, and you don't know how.
Or, sir, one of the problems of a quote unquote rigorous education is that you may be the victim of erroneous information.
How to integrate what comes in. So I said, for example, if he read a Marcus Garvey speech from 1937 that, Bob Marley referred to in Redemption Song, emancipate yourself from mental slavery, none but ourselves can free our minds, and now he's clumsily restating that, maybe that explains it. Or maybe he's come to some kind of clumsy version of that independently and thinks...
Or maybe he's just an agent of chaos who also happens to be a quote-unquote independent thinker, and when you mix those two things together, you may get someone who decides that he's going to express himself with a level of bombast. Or maybe he was told that, look, we're moving towards May Day. We're in the time of the Mother Goddess. We need you to say something inflammatory. I believe that it may be a mix of all three. I think that Kanye West was activated during that time period. I don't think that it's a coincidence that that whole situation occurred at TMZ Studios around May 1st. I believe actually it was on May 1st, which is quote-unquote May Day or Beltane. So Kanye West is, he's like a wind-up doll. They just send him out. They send him out to play. Oftentimes, unfortunately, with so many of our people, they don't understand the relevance of so many of these things. And the main thing, once again, is to make sure that you understand that the most important thing is the Most High, and keeping the laws of the Most High, and keeping the laws in the land to the best of your ability, and everything else will go much better. Our people have to mature. They have to come out of this adolescent mentality.
And thinks he's thought of some new interesting idea. My overarching point, Stephen A., is I don't care what Kanye West thinks about these issues.
I totally agree, sir.
He's not an intellectual, and I don't put stock in his thoughts.
But wouldn't you concede, Max, that because of his musical genius, that he has influence, and
Yes.
there are millions upon millions of people who may indeed listen to and embrace such idiotic rhetoric?
Well, Stephen A. Smith, you're pretty much confirming what I've already stated, which is that your true fear is that due to the paradigm that you yourself have helped to encourage, that being musicians and entertainers and athletes as leaders, you're worried that now this particular entertainer may be putting out the quote unquote wrong information for the youth. That's truly what you're worried about. And that's why it's incumbent upon you as a parent to teach your child. But that leads to another problem. What if you have nothing to teach your child? And that's the case in so many households in the so-called black community where they don't really know what to teach the children, because our people have become recipients of the quote unquote slave narrative. They've been the recipients of the demons of the previous generation. And that's why I tell brothers that it's up to you to break that cycle. You have to break that cycle of dysfunctionality so that the demons that were given to you are not passed down to your children.
Not to mention the fact that you have a bunch of folks who may come from the white community or various other communities that may sign with or co-sign that kind of thinking.
Well, that's really what the issue is for you, Stephen A. Smith, because as I state over and over again, the liberal black is totally concerned about and obsessed with how they're viewed by the Caucasian. So now you're going to allege that Kanye West, and I've stated this already, Kanye West is quote unquote making the black community look bad on TV. It's like when you invite company over and the kids start acting up. You take them to the back room and you say, hey, stop it. You're making me look bad in front of so-and-so. That's how our people operate when it comes to the Caucasian. They're so concerned with how they're perceived by the Caucasian, and they try to act like they're not with all these protests and these rantings and ravings. And it all goes back to the same thing. They want the hug, man.
Because it fits their narrative, particularly in the times that we're living in. We sit up here on this.
Well, if we're living in such racially contentious times, should it still be a priority what the Caucasian thinks about so-called black people? If, according to liberal blacks, as they allegedly assert, that we're living in such racially contentious times, or the time period that we're living in now is so much more racially toxic than it was 20 or 30 years ago, allegedly.
This show, and we lament the state of affairs. We lament the tenor of things. We lament how things are projected, and the projectors of the disseminators of those theories, those narratives, those nuggets of information, or what have you. We lament it big time. And so when you sit up there and you say, well, the president, and you make a point of him not being a part of it or whatever, I would say to you, if you're the leader of the free world, you're the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, and you have that kind of influence, then you should be a part of a conversation about like this just based on your title alone. That's all I'm thinking about. And you could.
I agree with that because that is part of his office.
And you could disagree with that, and I understand it, but that's my thinking. But as it pertains to Kanye West, to be a black person and to say what he said, it is so incredibly insulting.
Well, no, it's not incredibly insulting. You have the right to say that you agree with it or that you disagree with it. And if you disagree with it, then refute it and have a discussion with him. I mean, pretty much what Stephen A. Smith is saying is akin to a so-called black person stating that, well, if you're a Republican, then you just don't get it because blacks have to be Democrats. Like, this is the sentiment that has been put forth in the so-called black community, that everybody has to think the same thing or adhere to the same principles or ideologies, and that's just not the case. And I wish that so-called black people would become as inflamed about many of the degenerate behaviors that are multiplying in the so-called black community as they are with Kanye West and his statements.
Particularly considering the fact that he was saying it in a forum where he's trying to convince others to side with his thinking. Thank God that kid Van Lathan at TMZ was there to check him.
That's right. Thank God Van Lathan was there to let him understand that, no, you're not going to come against us liberal blacks because we're an army. We're an army on the internet. And we're going to shut you down, Kanye West. We're not going to allow you to put forth that level of thinking because I'm Van Lathan and I have a team white girl list. And that's a fact. Van Lathan has a team white girl list, but supposedly he's quote unquote pro-black. Once again, pro-blacks are really pro-white. Every last one of them. All those so-called pro-blacks are really pro-white. And the only pro-blacks that I respect are the ones who say, I'm out of here. I'm leaving America. I'm going to live in a country or a society that is majority black. I respect you. Okay? I respect you. But these niggas who stay here in America complaining and bitching all day, no, I don't respect them at all because I know what they're really about. So once again, Van Lathan is full of shit and so is Stephen A. Smith.
I don't know if Kanye West will ever recover from this. This is that bad. That bad.
I don't think he can, Stephen A. Well,
no, the both of you are hoping that he doesn't. You're both hoping that he doesn't. But anyway, that's pretty much it on this conversation. Once again, brothers, let's keep things in their proper perspective. All Kanye West is an entertainer. That's all he is. So anyway, peace.